Welcome to another Seize the Day. Today is Thursday, and it is June 16th, and we get another opportunity to spend some time together this morning. I trust you're waking up to a good day. Looks like it's going to be a promising day, and hope you're waking up feeling refreshed and ready to begin a new day together. I'm pretty excited about today's topic. We have been looking at a story that's found in Matthew chapter 9, verses 18 through 26. It was a story of Jesus raising the dead daughter of a ruler. We find out his name from the other Gospels in Mark and Luke. His name is Jairus. And so Jairus' daughter has died, and Jesus has gone to raise her from the dead. The whole story interrupted by a miracle that's performed on a woman who's had a blood issue for about 12 years. Jesus not only restores her physically, but also gives her her life back. Because of her particular affliction, it kept her at a distance from the mainstream of society. She was, kind of ostracized from the community, and now she has been welcomed back. Jesus does this, demonstrating again a power that is unlike any that people have seen to this moment in time. So this resurrection story is a story that is also giving us another hint into this question that we have been asking throughout this series called Power. It is a question that Matthew is constantly answering in terms of the various miracles that Jesus is performing. So we've learned that Jesus is willing in the healing of a leper. We see that he was able, right, having authority in the healing of the centurion's servant. We saw that Jesus was good as he not only heals Peter's mother-in-law with a fever, but all those who come to the home, it says that Jesus heals. We saw that Jesus then demonstrates an authority and power over all of creation by stilling the wind and the waves, so that even the disciples, they asked this question, what kind of man is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him? From there, we saw that Jesus demonstrated authority over evil by casting out the evil spirits that had wreaked havoc on the lives of two men. And then from there, we saw that Jesus also forgives sin. Only God can forgive sin, and yet this internal healing that is taking place in a person's soul is something that God delights in, and all those who come to him, he says, he forgives sin. That's the name, right? Jesus saves is God saves is what Jesus means, and it says that you shall name him Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. So we have been given all kinds of answers, and now in this story in Matthew, we have learned one other aspect, and that is that Jesus is Lord even over death. He raises the dead. And so that's the story now that is front and center for you and for me. Now, from this, I've taken us to a place in the Old Testament where we see another healing. As you turn to that passage, though, what I want you to begin to think with me is, as we've been going through these stories of miracles, we can get so caught up in the miracles themselves that sometimes we forget the intention that Matthew may have in writing these stories. In fact, here's just a little side note that maybe has passed your notice. But when you look at the healing, the raising of Jairus' daughter from the dead, the text in Matthew is such an abbreviated form that it puts all the emphasis on the actions of Jesus and very little on the surrounding narrative that was going on. When you read in Mark's gospel or Luke's gospel, Mark has twice the amount of verbiage regarding this miracle than Matthew does. So you begin to realize that Matthew, he's getting right to the point because he doesn't want us to lose the point. He doesn't want us to get lost in all the details of the story that we're going to walk away forgetting that his main intention here in showing the power and authority that Jesus has is so that we might learn something more about Jesus. And in this case, we're just adding one more layer to what kind of man is this? And now we're seeing that it's the kind of man that raises the dead. It's another reason why we can trust him as the Son of God, the one who has come to set humanity back into relationship with the God who has given us life and breath. So I thought that if we kind of understand what God is doing in these miracles, it would be awesome to take a look in the Old Testament to see how God has done that in previous places. And so for that, I thought this would be a good way for you and me to be able to take a look at a passage. And I'm going to bring up a map here in a moment. But I'd like for us to just turn in our Bibles to 1 Kings chapter 17. And as you find your way there, I just want you to go back and I just want to reiterate again the background here. What we're finding is that the nation of Israel is now divided. It is a northern kingdom that retains the name Israel, and the southern kingdom, which is named Judah. Out of the 12 tribes that comprise all of the nation of Israel, the northern kingdom is comprised of 10 of those tribes, and 2 of the tribes now comprise the southern kingdom, and that southern kingdom is known as Judah. So there is this tension that is existing between the northern and southern kingdom. Jerusalem is in the southern kingdom. In Jerusalem is the temple. It is a place that God has marked out for all of his people to gather together at specified times throughout the year to gather for feasts and festivals and worship, and that there they would encourage one another by their presence, and they would also demonstrate their allegiance to God who has provided for them in many and varied fashions. Well, with the kingdom being divided, the northern tribes, the 10 tribes, they began to, under the direction of Jeroboam, one of their first kings, they set up alternate altars that just fueled an idolatry within the nation of Israel that would eventually bring them great harm. Assyria will come down as a judgment arm of God, and the whole northern kingdom is going to be eradicated. It's a sad day in Israel's history, but this will take place, and then that's around 722 BC, and then somewhere around 586 BC, we're going to find that the southern kingdom is also going to be overrun, not by the Assyrians, but this time by the Babylonians. And one of the famous kings, King Nebuchadnezzar, will be at the point of that spear that just comes and destroys Jerusalem, destroys its temple, takes the people of Israel and scatters them in exile. And that moment in their history is something that is going to be talked about over and over and over again, not only in the Old Testament but in the New Testament, the day in which God had called his people out into exile. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because when you come to 1 Kings chapter 17, the northern kingdom has not yet been judged by God through the invading armies of Assyria. Right now, they are having a number of kings And we're going to become familiar with one whose name is Ahab. Ahab, it says, reigned as king of Israel, the northern kingdom, and he did so for more than 22 years. It says that Ahab did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. Not only did he partake of the sins of Jeroboam, who, as I said to you, had created two different, meeting places, altars for the children of Israel to maintain their spiritual devotion. But it was a false devotion because it was about a form of religion, but they took away all of its power. God had already designated the place for them to come, but because of the hardness of their hearts, because of the antagonism between these, factions, what we find now is that Ahab not only continued the sin of Jeroboam, but he added to that all kinds of Baal worship and introducing all kinds of idolatry into the nation of Israel, not the least of which is that he married Jezebel, who was the daughter of a man by the name of Ethbaal, who was from Sidon. He was the king of the Sidonians. So, having said that to you, there comes a time now when God is going to speak into their life, and the consequence of that is going to result in a great miracle. And I'm going to show you today and tomorrow how God uses these things, just in the same way that Matthew is referring, disclosing to us the power of Jesus, so that we would experience a faith that has substance to it, that we are building our faith on a foundation that's strong, that enables us to face, the various trials of our day, knowing who it is that we serve, that he can be trusted with the future and with the present. So here's an Old Testament story of God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and uses these stories as a way of just leaning in and demonstrating to people more and more that he is God, King of kings, Lord of lords. So now we come into this story where God is going to raise up Elijah the Tishbite. Now, here is where I want to get back to showing you this map. And just for a moment, what I'd like to do is, this is a map really of various events in the life of Elijah and later Elisha, another one of the prophets that would succeed Elijah. But notice at the top of the screen, over near the Mediterranean, you have Sidon up here at the top, Zarephath down just on the coastline, but just a short way from Sidon, and up from Tyre. And this whole region here is called Phoenicia, which goes all the way down. And if you see down here, it says there is Mount Carmel. I want you to keep that in mind, because tomorrow we're going to talk about something that happens in Mount Carmel. One other thing that I want you to see is, you see over here on the right side of your map, there's Tishba. That's the birthplace of Elijah. So it's a mountainous region. It's a rugged country, and it seems that Elijah typifies that ruggedness of that terrain. There's not a lot of softness to Elijah. He's a very strong person, and God is using him mightily. Okay, as you continue to look at this map, though, I hope it starts to give you some bearings, because up on the top, look towards the top in the middle, you see that place called Dan? See, that was the northernest most part of Israel. If you were to go all the way south, what you would discover is that there's another place called Bethel. And Bethel would be a place where God would begin. See, at the very bottom, you could just barely make it out on this map. It says Bethel is at the bottom of the map. So those are the two extremes within the nation of Israel, where God set up these alternate where Jeroboam, one of the first kings of this divided kingdom, set up these alternate altars. So this map then now is giving you a little sense of what is going on at this period of time in 1 Kings chapter 17. So Elisha, who's known as a Tishbite, rugged country, now he goes all the way over to the coast, up on the top left there, on the coast of the Mediterranean, part of Sidon. Remember, Ahab married a woman from Sidon, the king of Sidon, called Ethbaal, and his name also, is just named after the gods of that territory. God calls Elijah. He pronounces a drought that's going to come onto the land, and as a result of that drought, what we begin to see is that the people are really beginning to suffer. So let's get back to our story now, and what we found is that Elijah has been hiding out in this Cherith ravine. It says morning and evening God would bring him food flown in by the ravens, and the water at the brook that where he was staying provided him with the needed water and food. So God was protecting Elijah during this time when the northern kingdom was experiencing quite a famine. And Ahab is looking all over for Elijah because he's not a happy camper. And then the day comes where God dries up this lake. I shared yesterday, I said, what was once a place of blessing, now that blessing is moving on. And as a result of that blessing moving on, we find that God is now also going to do something great in the life of Elijah as he is, about to display something more of the power of God. Zarephath, just so you remember, up in that seacoast region, right, is part of the territory that Jezebel's father ruled over. So this is right in the heart of all of this idolatry. Why is God going to go up there and do this kind of miracle? See, this is getting at the issue of why I'm saying the miracles of Jesus, they're not just meant to demonstrate something of the power of God, but also something of his identity and his will and his purpose. We're going to find in this story, it's the same thing. God is going to do something great in Zarephath that is going to give a name to Elijah that is going to play out in the ongoing story of what God is doing with his people. So here's the thing. The Phoenicia, right, that coastal region where Sidon and Tyre and Mount Carmel, they're all in that seacoast region, known as Phoenicia. They're watered by fresh streams from those Lebanon mountains. And the drought doesn't seem to have really affected that area as much as it has in Israel. So it had plenty of water. But what seems to have happened is that drought is affecting much of Israel, and so water in that area may have been plentiful, but the food, they were dependent upon the rest of Israel to provide them with food. And so you can begin to see that in the text, as we begin to read Zarephath, they are really beginning to constrict their food supplies. They are being impacted by the drought that all of Israel is experiencing. Kind of like today, we're hearing news, right, about how the Ukraine provides so much wheat to the rest of the world. And with the war going on now, much of that, it says, has fallen under the control of Russia. And you can begin to see now how that's going to play itself out in a geopolitical way, and cause a great deal of disturbance in the whole food chain, across, major parts of the world. So it's the same thing that's happening here, except this is caused by a drought that God brought on Israel because of its disobedience. So what does God do? God sends Elijah right into the heart of this idolatrous nation. And he comes upon a woman there, and she evidently recognizes, Elijah, because let's pick it up at verse 10. Elijah goes to Zarephath. When he came to the town, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so that I might have a drink?" And custom says that it wasn't an unusual thing. Supplying water to the thirsty in that region was considered a duty that was almost sacred. So the woman, she's going off to bring back water for Elijah. But as she was going, he calls out to her and says, "And bring me, please, a piece of bread." Notice the woman, she must have recognized something about Elijah. Could have been his reputation, could have been his accent, could have been the way he was dressed. All she knows, remember, this is Phoenicia. It is a heart of idolatrous country. This is not a people who are serving the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yet she turns to him in verse 12 and she says, "As surely as the Lord your God lives." And she uses the name of God in addressing Elijah. So she apparently, recognizes him. And so she refers to Jehovah, Yahweh, as your God. And with this oath, she indicates that she didn't have so much as a small cake of bread to share. She says, "I don't have any bread. Only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son that we may eat it." And then what she say? "And die." This is like her last meal. This is just underscoring again the effects of this of the drought that has come on the land. Food is in short supply. What Elijah is asking for, she doesn't have any to spare. So what does Elijah say? He says, "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small cake of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and for your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord gives rain on the land." Isn't that interesting? Here they are dependent on in large measure upon Israel for their food supply, and there's great scarcity here, and so the poor would have been hardest hit. But somehow or another, I want you to catch that this woman, she listens to what Elijah has to say, and it was something maybe about his forcefulness, maybe something about his directness, but she trusts him, and as a result, her faith is rewarded. She has faith in Elijah that what he says is going to come true, and so that last bit of bread that she has, something about Elijah that is causing her to listen to him. And so he says, "Don't be afraid. Go home, do as you said. But this flour is not going to run out, and the jug of oil is not going to run dry." And look at verse 15 in this text. She went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word the Lord had spoken by Elijah. Now, listen to verse 17. It says here, "Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill, and he grew worse and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, 'What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?'" Isn't it interesting? The passing of her son somehow or another reminded this woman perhaps of sin in her own life. I don't want to give too much conjecture here, But in the death of her son, it brought up some kind of memories in her life. She's saying here, did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son? She saw in Elijah a man of God. Why? Well, he spoke as a prophet. And a prophet, it says, speaks the word of God. If you don't speak the words of God, then you're not a prophet. If the things that you say you're prophesying don't come true, it says you're worthy of death. This was a serious matter in these days. And so consequently, he's speaking into this woman's life, and it is happening just as he says. And now her son dies, and she's looking to him and saying, what is going on here? And as a result, look what it says. Elijah says, give me your son. He took him from her arms, carried him into the upper room where he was staying, laid him on his bed. He cries out to God in this prayer. He says, oh, Lord my God, have you brought tragedy also upon this widow I'm staying with by causing her son to die? There is this lament. Elijah has to contend with life as it's dealt. It's not like he's given some magic wand or a crystal ball that he's looking into. He's living life as God is unfolding it. And there's a lot of confusion about the way in which life unfolds. I know that personally. I'm sure you guys do too. Each day comes and it has enough trouble of its own, as Jesus says. But he says, Lord, why are you allowing this to happen? And then he stretched himself on the boy 3 times, cried out to the Lord, oh, Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him. And it says here, the Lord heard Elijah's cry. Elijah believed that God was able to raise the dead. There are no other examples that we read about in the Old Testament up to this point. Why would Elijah believe that? In the same way, why would Jairus come to Jesus to raise his dead daughter? He was desperate, heartbroken, recognizing his own powerlessness. But he saw in Jesus perhaps the one who had authority and power to do it. And by faith, he comes asking. And in the same way, this Elijah is looking to God and saying, God, you have to do something here. And God hears his cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child, carried him down from the room into the house, and he gave him to his mother and said, look, your son is alive. Notice what this woman says. She says, now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. Yeah, you sit back and you go, hey, the raising of this dead, of course you're going to believe. Well, is that the case when we see Jesus raising the dead? Is that what we just saw when Jesus raises Jairus' daughter? There were people who laughed at Jesus when that happened. And we will find, as these stories continue to unfold, that the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they have a way of blocking out all of this, extraordinary work that Jesus is doing, and all they can see is that Jesus is, eroding their positions of power and prestige among the people, and they want Jesus out of the picture, to the point where they begin to conspire that he would be killed. And it says in the text, right, that it's better for one to die than for everyone, to suffer, any kind of repercussions, because they're looking at Jesus in an entirely different way. So, my friends, here's a text that God does a miracle. And when you have eyes to see and ears to hear, it changed this woman's life. She had eyes to see it. Some people, they are just going to harden their hearts towards that. But here, in the heart of pagan country, in Zarephath, not far from the city of Sidon, where Jezebel's father reigned. And Jezebel is the wife of King Ahab, king over all of Israel. Yeah, God does his work even in this idolatrous place. And this woman, she begins to trust in the very word of God that comes from the mouth of Elijah. Great miracle. We could close the story. We think, oh, all is good. Yeah, but then there's another side to this. And I want you to see why God is doing this, because other incidences, circumstances are now going to unfold. And you can see how God created all of this buzz around, what he's doing, not just to show off the miracles, but to get people ready in the same way that God is using Jesus to get us ready, to bring people to a place of repentance, to bring us to a place where we can see in Jesus the hope of the world, right? Our life, abundant life. My friends, I want you to think about that. And join me tomorrow as we bring this to a close. But recognizing that God's faithfulness, the display of his power in the days in which we're living, is intended to draw us close to him, so that, like this woman in Zarephath, we are professing an undying devotion to him. It's a way to seize the day each and every day. My friends, I hope you seize the day, and I hope that you never forget that God is good all the time. Looking forward to tomorrow, Lord willing, and we'll bring a dramatic conclusion to our story. God bless you.